Lucy had always dreamed of working at a prestigious law firm in the heart of New York City. After years of hard work and determination, her dream was finally coming true. As she stepped into the towering glass building, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The bustling energy of the city mirrored her own eagerness to start this new chapter in her life. The reception area was sleek and modern, filled with the hum of activity. Lucy was greeted by a friendly receptionist who guided her to the conference room where she would meet her new colleagues. As she walked through the halls, she couldn't help but notice the impressive array of awards and accolades displayed on the walls. This was a place where excellence was the norm, and Lucy was ready to prove herself. In the conference room, Lucy was introduced to her team. The partners and associates welcomed her warmly, each handshake and smile reinforcing her sense of belonging. Among them was Charles Whitaker, the firm's managing partner. Charles was a commanding presence, with a reputation for being both brilliant and demanding. Lucy had admired him from afar, having read about his numerous courtroom victories and his unwavering commitment to justice. As Charles extended his hand to Lucy, she felt a surge of pride. This was the man she had aspired to work with, and now she was part of his team. Charles's eyes held a glint of approval as he welcomed her aboard, a gesture that filled Lucy with confidence. She felt a sense of validation, knowing that her hard work had brought her to this moment. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of introductions and orientations. Lucy's new office was a sleek, glass-walled space with a stunning view of the city skyline. She took a moment to soak it all in, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. This was her dream job, and she was determined to make the most of it. As the day drew to a close, Lucy reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the late nights studying, the sacrifices, and the unwavering support of her family and friends. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and a renewed determination to excel in her role. Walking out of the office building, Lucy felt a wave of optimism wash over her. The future was bright, and she was ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. She knew that working at this prestigious law firm would be demanding, but she was confident in her abilities and eager to prove herself. Lucy looked up at the towering skyscrapers of New York City, feeling a profound sense of possibility. This was the beginning of an exciting new chapter in her life, and she was ready to make her mark. With a heart full of hope and ambition, Lucy stepped into the bustling streets. Her eyes set firmly on the future. Lucy had been pouring herself into her work, often staying late into the night, her desk illuminated by the solitary glow of her lamp. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. Her colleagues admired her relentless commitment, and Charles seemed particularly impressed. Her heart swelled with pride whenever he acknowledged her hard work. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, Lucy began to notice subtle shifts in Charles's behavior. At first, it was easy to dismiss the occasional cold remark or the impatient tap of his fingers on the desk. She told herself that high-pressure environments brought out the worst in everyone. But soon, these moments became more frequent and harder to ignore. Charles started making demands that seemed unreasonable, layering task upon task without regard for the time or effort required to complete them. His once encouraging demeanor had turned into one of ruthless efficiency, and his praise, which she had grown to crave, became increasingly rare. Lucy found herself caught in a cycle of striving for approval that never seemed to come. She would lay awake at night, replaying the day's interactions in her mind, trying to figure out where she had gone wrong. Her friends outside of work noticed her growing stress, but she brushed off their concerns with forced smiles and mumbled reassurances. The office, once a place of vibrant energy and camaraderie, now felt like a minefield. Her colleagues, who had initially admired her, now seemed wary, as if her close proximity to Charles's temper might bring his wrath upon them as well. Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every mistake, no matter how small, meticulously noted. One particularly grueling week, Charles assigned her a complex case with an impossible deadline. She worked through the weekend, barely eating or sleeping, driven by a desperate need to prove herself. When she finally handed in the completed work, her hands shaking from exhaustion, Charles barely glanced at it before tossing it aside. His dismissive gesture cut deeper than any words could have. Despite the growing tension, Lucy remained determined. She convinced herself that if she just worked harder, if she just met his impossible standards, things would get better. She didn't want to believe that the man she had once respected so deeply could be so callous. Her dedication bordered on obsession, each completed task a tiny victory in a war she was losing. As the weeks dragged on, the office became a battleground. Lucy's health began to suffer. She lost weight, her skin grew pale, and dark circles formed under her eyes. Her once meticulously organized desk became cluttered with unfinished work and empty coffee cups. But she pushed on, driven by a stubborn hope that things would change. Charles's demands grew more erratic, his demeanor colder. He began to isolate Lucy from her colleagues, assigning her tasks that kept her tied to her desk while others attended important meetings and social events. The isolation was suffocating, and Lucy's world narrowed to the confines of her cubicle and the relentless pressure of Charles's expectations. One evening, as she sat hunched over her desk, her vision blurred from hours of staring at the screen, Lucy felt a sudden wave of despair. She had given everything to this job, to this man she had once admired, and it had only brought her misery. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut, leaving her breathless and trembling. But even in her darkest moments, a small spark of defiance remained. She would not let Charles break her, she promised herself. She would find a way to endure, to rise above the toxic environment that had consumed her life. With renewed determination, Lucy resolved to keep fighting. No matter how difficult the path ahead might be, Lucy walked down the corridor of the law firm with a spring in her step. It was a typical Friday afternoon, and she felt a sense of accomplishment after wrapping up a demanding week. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden call to Charles Whitaker's office. A flutter of excitement welled within her. She assumed this unexpected meeting was to commend her for her hard work on a crucial case she had recently handled. As she entered Charles's office, the atmosphere felt unusually cold. She noticed Charles sitting behind his imposing mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. Her anticipation quickly turned to confusion when he began speaking. Instead of receiving praise, she was confronted with accusations of mishandling the very case she had poured her heart into. The words hit her like a ton of bricks, each allegation more unfounded than the last. Lucy's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. She had been meticulous in her work, and her performance had been nothing short of exemplary. Yet here she was, being terminated on the spot for reasons that seemed fabricated. The room seemed to shrink as she struggled to keep her composure. Charles's cold and detached demeanor only deepened her sense of betrayal. He offered no room for explanation, no chance to defend herself. As she left the office, the weight of the unjust termination bore down on her. The shock and devastation were palpable, a gnawing feeling of something profoundly unfair gnawing at her insides. Lucy walked through the office, her colleagues' eyes following her with a mix of pity and curiosity. The whispers had already begun, but no one dared to speak up against Charles, fearing reprisal. Her steps were heavy as she returned to her desk to pack her belongings. Each item she placed in the cardboard box felt like a piece of her shattered dreams. The anger simmered beneath her. Sorrow, a burning desire for justice taking root. She knew deep down that this was not just a simple case of workplace politics. There was something more sinister at play. As she left the office for the last time, Lucy was determined to uncover the truth. She would not let this injustice break her. Instead, it would be the catalyst that drove her to seek the truth and expose the corruption that had wronged her. News of Lucy's termination spread like wildfire through the office corridors, casting a somber shadow over the typically bustling atmosphere. Colleagues exchanged furtive glances and whispered theories in hushed tones, their voices barely audible above the hum of computer screens and the rustle of papers. Fear of Charles's notorious wrath kept their speculations confined to the sanctuary of private conversations, away from prying ears. Lucy, standing at her desk, methodically packed her belongings into a cardboard box. Each item she placed inside felt like a piece of her shattered dream falling into place. The framed photo of her family, the small potted plant she nurtured since her first day, and the stack of meticulously organized case files, all relics of a promising career abruptly cut short. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the anger and betrayal that churned within her. As she continued to pack, her mind replayed the events of the past few days. The unjust accusation, the look of cold indifference on Charles's face as he dismissed her, and the silent stares of her colleagues, who dared not speak up in her defense. The unfairness of it all gnawed at her, fueling a burning desire for justice that refused to be extinguished. Her thoughts were interrupted by the occasional passing colleague who offered a sympathetic glance but little else. They, too, were trapped in the oppressive atmosphere of the firm, where dissent was met with swift and merciless retribution. Lucy understood their silence, but it did little to soothe the sting of isolation she felt. With her box nearly full, Lucy took a moment to survey her now barren desk. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant workspace she had once so proudly claimed. The memories of late nights spent poring over case files, the camaraderie of shared victories, and the hope for a bright future all seemed distant and unattainable now. Yet, amid the sorrow, a steely resolve began to take root. Lucy knew she couldn't let this injustice go unanswered. She had always believed in the power of the law to right wrongs, and now, more than ever, she needed to harness that belief for herself. The desire for justice that simmered within her was no longer just a personal vendetta, it was a call to action. As she closed the flaps of the cardboard box, sealing away the remnants of her time at the firm, Lucy felt a strange sense of clarity. The oppressive silence of the office, once a source of discomfort, now seemed like a canvas upon which she could paint her path to redemption. She would find the truth, uncover the hidden machinations that led to her downfall, and expose the darkness that lurked beneath the firm's polished exterior. With a final glance around the office, Lucy lifted her box and walked towards the exit. The whispers followed her, but this time, they seemed less like a judgment and more like a chorus of unspoken support. She could feel the weight of their unvoiced hopes and fears, and it only strengthened her resolve. As she stepped out of the office, the cool air of the hallway greeted her, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere she had left behind. Each step she took felt like a step towards reclaiming her agency, her dignity, and her future. The burning desire for justice that had ignited within her now blazed with a fierce intensity, guiding her every move. Lucy knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready. She would investigate, uncover the truth, and bring those responsible to account. And in doing so, she hoped to not only vindicate herself, but also inspire others to stand up against the injustices they faced. Her journey was just beginning, and with each step, She carried the silent support of her colleagues and the unwavering belief in her cause. The fight for justice would be long and arduous, but Lucy was prepared to see it through to the end. Lucy, overwhelmed by the injustice of her sudden termination, found herself at a crossroads. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Charles's actions than met the eye. Determined to uncover the truth, she embarked on a quest that would lead her down paths she never imagined. Lucy began her investigation by sifting through old case files, meticulously combing each document for inconsistencies or signs of misconduct. She spent countless hours in the dimly lit corners of the public library, poring over legal records and court documents. The more she delved into Charles's past, the more her suspicions grew. It wasn't long before she decided to speak with former employees, hoping to find others who had experienced similar injustices. Each conversation painted a clearer picture of Charles's dark side. Former colleagues recounted tales of his manipulative tactics, his ruthless ambition, and the fear he instilled in those around him. One by one, they described a man who was far from the respectable boss Lucy once admired. Their stories fueled her determination, and she knew she needed to dig deeper. Unwilling to leave any stone unturned, Lucy hired a private investigator. The seasoned detective, with his network of contacts and sharp intuition, quickly uncovered a trail of deceit and corruption stretching back years. Every new piece of information seemed to confirm what Lucy had suspected all along. Charles was not the man he pretended to be. As the days turned into weeks, Lucy's investigation became an obsession. She lost track of time as she pieced together the puzzle, each discovery bringing her closer to the truth. The sleepless nights and relentless pursuit of justice took their toll, but Lucy pressed on, driven by a burning desire to expose Charles for who he really was. The private investigator uncovered a series of settlements paid out to former employees who had been wronged by Charles. These settlements, hidden under layers of legal jargon and confidentiality agreements, revealed a pattern of behavior that could no longer be ignored. With each revelation, Lucy's resolve strengthened, and she knew she was on the right path. Lucy reached out to more former employees, each conversation adding another layer to the growing case against Charles. She listened intently as they recounted their experiences, their voices filled with a mixture of fear and relief. It became clear that many had been silenced by threats and intimidation, their stories buried under a facade of professionalism and respectability. As the evidence mounted, Lucy began to see the full extent of Charles's manipulation. He had used his position of power to control and exploit those around him, leaving a trail of broken careers and shattered lives in his wake. The realization filled Lucy with a sense of urgency. She knew she had to act quickly before Charles could cover his tracks. Lucy meticulously documented everything she had discovered, creating a comprehensive dossier that detailed Charles's misdeeds. She included testimonies from former employees, copies of settlement agreements, and records of questionable financial transactions. The dossier was damning, a testament to the lengths Charles had gone to maintain his grip on power. With a clear picture of Charles's true nature, Lucy felt a mix of vindication and anger. She had uncovered the truth, but the fight was far from over. She knew that exposing Charles would be a daunting task, one that would require courage and determination. But Lucy was ready. She had come too far to back down now. Her quest for truth had transformed her from a naive young woman into a determined crusader for justice. She was no longer alone in her fight. She had the support of those who had suffered in silence for too long. Together, they would bring Charles to justice and ensure that no one else would fall victim to his deceit. As Lucy prepared for the next step in her journey, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The truth was out there, and she was determined to bring it to light, no matter the cost. Lucy had been relentless in her quest for the truth, and her persistence had finally paid off. She found a name that had been buried in the firm's history: Amanda. This former junior associate had mysteriously resigned 5 years ago, leaving behind only whispers and a curious gap in the firm's timeline. Intrigued and sensing a crucial lead, Lucy decided to track her down. Her search led her to a small, quiet town far removed from the bustling streets of New York City. Here, Amanda lived under a different name, trying to piece together a life that seemed worlds away from her past at the prestigious law firm. The town's serene atmosphere was a stark contrast to the high-stakes environment where Lucy had first encountered Charles. Lucy arrived at Amanda's modest home, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. She knocked on the door, and after a few moments, it opened to reveal a woman who seemed to carry the weight of her past in her eyes. Lucy introduced herself and explained why she was there, hoping that Amanda would trust her enough to talk. Amanda's initial reluctance was palpable. She had spent years trying to escape the shadows of her past, and the sudden reminder was both unwelcome and unsettling. She listened to Lucy's story, her expression guarded, her eyes flickering with memories she had long tried to suppress. Lucy could see the hesitation, but she also saw a flicker of recognition and perhaps a shared pain. Amanda invited Lucy inside, offering her a seat in a cozy living room that felt like a sanctuary from the outside world. The walls were adorned with pictures of a new life, friends, family, moments of happiness that Amanda had fought hard to create. Lucy knew she had to tread carefully, respecting the fragility of Amanda's hard-won peace. As they sat together, Lucy shared her own ordeal, the unexpected termination, the whispers at the office, and her burning desire to uncover the truth about Charles. Amanda listened quietly, her gaze fixed on a distant point, as if seeing something beyond the present. Lucy's words seemed to resonate with her, stirring echoes of a time she had tried to forget. There was a long silence after Lucy finished speaking. Amanda seemed to be weighing her options, torn between the safety of silence and the potential catharsis of sharing her story. Finally, she took a deep breath, the decision made. She nodded slowly, indicating her willingness to talk. Lucy felt a surge of gratitude and relief, knowing that this was a crucial step in her journey for justice. Amanda began to speak, her voice tinged with a mix of bitterness and sadness. She recounted her time at the law firm, describing how she had once been full of ambition and hope, much like Lucy. But her enthusiasm had been steadily eroded by Charles's manipulative and controlling behavior. She spoke of how he had initially seemed like a mentor, only to reveal a darker side that sought to dominate and intimidate. As Amanda's story unfolded, Lucy realized that her own experiences were not isolated incidents, but part of a disturbing pattern. Amanda described how Charles had used his position of power to exploit her, making unreasonable demands and threatening her career when she resisted. The emotional toll had been devastating, leaving Amanda with no choice but to resign and disappear, hoping to find solace in anonymity. Lucy listened intently, her resolve hardening with each revelation. Amanda's story was the final piece of the puzzle, confirming her suspicions and strengthening her determination to bring Charles to justice. She thanked Amanda sincerely, knowing the courage it took to revisit such painful memories. As Lucy left Amanda's home, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The truth was now within reach, and she knew that with Amanda's testimony, she could expose the man who had caused so much harm. The small town seemed to recede into the background as Lucy drove away, her mind focused on the next steps in her fight for justice. Amanda sat on her small couch, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Lucy's presence in the room was both a comfort and a reminder of the life Amanda had left behind. The living room was modest, a stark contrast to the opulence of the law firm where they had both once worked. The air was heavy with an unspoken understanding, a shared experience of betrayal and fear. As Lucy recounted her story, Amanda's eyes softened with empathy. She had seen the same determined look in her own eyes once, a burning desire for justice that had been extinguished by Charles's manipulative tactics. Amanda knew too well the weight of the secrets she carried and the toll they had taken on her soul. She had been reluctant to open old wounds, but Lucy's earnest plea for truth stirred something deep within her. Taking a deep breath, Amanda began to speak, her voice trembling at first, but gaining strength as the words poured out. She explained how Charles had initially been charming, a mentor who seemed genuinely interested in her career. It wasn't long before his true nature emerged. Charles had begun to isolate her from her colleagues, making her feel special and indispensable, all while tightening his grip on her life. The affair had started subtly, with lingering glances and late-night meetings that seemed innocent at first. But as Amanda became more entangled in his web, Charles's demands grew increasingly controlling. He monitored her every move, dictating who she could associate with and what cases she could work on. The lines between her personal and professional life blurred, and Amanda found herself trapped in a nightmarish existence. Charles's threats were insidious. He warned that if she ever tried to leave or expose him, he would destroy her career and reputation. The fear of retribution kept Amanda silent, even as the weight of his manipulation crushed her spirit. She described the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, and the moments of deep despair that led her to make the hardest decision of her life. 5 years ago, Amanda had gathered the courage to escape. She resigned from the firm, leaving behind a promising career and the life she had worked so hard to build. Moving to a small town under a different name was her way of starting anew, a desperate attempt to reclaim her autonomy and sanity. But the scars of her past were never far from her mind. As Amanda spoke, Lucy listened intently, her heart aching for the woman who had endured so much. Amanda's revelation was the final piece of the puzzle, confirming Lucy's suspicions about Charles's true nature. It was a moment of profound connection between the two women, a shared understanding of the darkness they had both faced. Amanda's story reignited the fire within Lucy. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she was not alone in her quest for justice. Amanda's courage in sharing her painful past gave Lucy the strength to continue her fight. It was no longer just about avenging her own wrongful termination. It was about exposing the systemic abuse and manipulation that Charles had wielded over so many. With a newfound resolve, Lucy vowed to bring Charles to justice. She thanked Amanda for her bravery and reassured her that her story would not be in vain. The two women embraced, their bond forged through shared pain and resilience. As Lucy left Amanda's home, she felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but also a sense of hope. Amanda watched Lucy leave, a mixture of relief and apprehension in her heart. She had taken a significant step in reclaiming her voice, and she hoped that Lucy would succeed where she had once faltered. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Amanda felt a glimmer of optimism. As Lucy drove back to the city, her mind raced with plans and strategies. She knew that exposing Charles would not be easy, but with Amanda's testimony and the evidence she had gathered, she felt more confident than ever. The story was far from over, but Lucy was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the quiet of Amanda's living room, the echoes of her past began to fade. She sat in silence, contemplating the courage it had taken to confront her demons. Though the wounds were still fresh, Amanda felt a sense of liberation. She had finally spoken her truth, and in doing so, she had helped pave the way for justice. Lucy and Amanda's paths had crossed for a reason, and together, they would dismantle the facade that Charles had so carefully constructed. It was a battle for truth, for justice, and for the countless others who had suffered in silence. And as the sun set on the small town, Amanda felt a newfound sense of peace, knowing that she had played a part in the fight for what was right. Lucy knew she needed help to take down Charles and expose his true nature. With Amanda's revelations fresh in her mind, she reached out to Sarah Roberts, a well-known investigative journalist renowned for her integrity and fearlessness. Lucy pored over her findings, detailing every piece of evidence she had uncovered. Sarah listened attentively, her eyes narrowing with determination as Lucy unfolded the story. Sarah agreed to collaborate with Lucy, understanding the gravity of the situation. The two of them set about devising a comprehensive plan to bring Charles's wrongdoings to light. Their strategy was meticulous. First, Sarah would independently verify the evidence Lucy had gathered. She began by contacting the former employees Lucy had interviewed, listening to their accounts and confirming the patterns of manipulation and deceit. Sarah's investigative skills brought a new depth to the case. She traced financial records, finding irregularities that suggested embezzlement. She spoke to clients who had mysteriously lost their cases, piecing together a web of corruption that extended beyond what Lucy had initially discovered. Each new testimony added weight to their case, painting a picture of a man who had used his position to exploit and intimidate those around him. Together, they worked tirelessly, their resolve steeled by the stories of those who had suffered in silence. Lucy's nights were spent poring over documents, while Sarah's days were filled with interviews and research. They communicated constantly, refining their plan and ensuring that every detail was accounted for. Sarah's investigation took her to places Lucy couldn't reach. She uncovered evidence of Charles's shady dealings with powerful figures, people who had enabled his rise and turned a blind eye to his misdeeds. These revelations were shocking, even to Lucy, who had already seen so much. As Sarah pieced together the final parts of the puzzle, they knew they were ready to take the next step. The time had come to expose Charles. Sarah prepared her exposé with precision, crafting it to ensure maximum impact. She knew this wasn't just about one man. It was about the culture of silence and fear that had allowed him to thrive. The article needed to be irrefutable, a beacon of truth that would compel action. Lucy and Sarah reviewed the evidence one last time, double-checking every fact and testimony. The weight of their endeavor pressed heavily on them, but they knew they couldn't falter. This was their moment to bring justice not only for Lucy and Amanda, but for everyone who had been wronged by Charles. When Sarah finally published the exposé, it was like a bomb going off in the legal community. The article went viral almost immediately, shared and reshared across social media and news outlets. The public reaction was swift and fierce. Outrage poured in from all corners, demanding accountability and justice. Charles's world began to crumble. The firm, desperate to distance itself from the scandal, suspended him and launched its own internal investigation. Clients withdrew their business, and colleagues who had once feared him now openly condemned his actions. It was a swift and brutal fall from grace. Authorities soon got involved, and Charles was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and sexual misconduct. The case against him was strong, built on the mountain of evidence that Lucy and Sarah had painstakingly gathered. As he faced the legal consequences of his actions, the firm appointed new leadership, vowing to reform and ensure such abuses could never happen again. Lucy felt a profound sense of vindication. She had not only avenged herself, but had also helped countless others who had suffered in silence. The support and admiration she received from colleagues and strangers alike were overwhelming. Her bravery inspired others to come forward with their stories, leading to widespread reforms within the industry. As Lucy looked out over the city, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment and freedom. Her fight had made a difference, and she knew that the world was a little bit better for it. Sarah had spent weeks meticulously piecing together the story, each revelation more damning than the last. Her article was not just a piece of journalism, it was a powerful testament to the courage of those who had suffered in silence for far too long. When the exposé finally went live, it was as if a dam had burst. The article detailed an exhaustive list of Charles's unethical practices, from manipulating legal outcomes to exploiting and intimidating his employees. Sarah had managed to obtain testimonies from numerous former and current employees, all corroborating Lucy's findings. Amanda's story was particularly harrowing, shedding light on the emotional and psychological abuse she had endured. The evidence was irrefutable, and the tone of the article was both compassionate towards the victims and relentless in its pursuit of justice. Within hours, the exposé went viral. Social media was ablaze with outrage and disbelief. The hashtag #ExposeCharles began trending, and the legal community was in an uproar. Colleagues who had once feared Charles now openly condemned him. The article was shared in legal forums, discussed in professional circles, and even made its way to mainstream news outlets. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Charles, once a towering figure in the legal world, found himself at the center of a storm. His phone rang incessantly with calls from board members, clients, and journalists seeking comments. The board of directors at the law firm convened an emergency meeting, and it was clear that they could no longer ignore the gravity of the situation. Charles was suspended pending an internal investigation, but the damage was already done. As more people came forward with their stories, the extent of Charles's misconduct became even more apparent. Former employees shared their experiences of being bullied, manipulated, and coerced into unethical practices. Clients revealed how they had been misled and exploited. The legal community, once silent, now spoke with one voice, demanding accountability and justice. In the days that followed, Charles's empire began to crumble. High-profile clients severed their ties with the firm, fearing association with the scandal. The firm's reputation, painstakingly built over decades, was in tatters. Financial losses mounted as lawsuits were filed against Charles and the firm. The board, desperate to salvage what was left, distanced themselves from Charles and initiated sweeping reforms to address the systemic issues that had allowed his behavior to go unchecked. Lucy watched the events unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and relief. Her journey had been long and arduous, but seeing the truth come to light made it all worthwhile. She received messages of support from colleagues and strangers alike, praising her bravery and determination. The legal community, once complicit in its silence, now rallied around her, inspired by her courage. Sarah, too, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her work had not only exposed a corrupt figure, but had also given a voice to those who had been silenced for too long. The exposé had sparked a much-needed conversation about ethics and accountability in the legal profession. As the dust began to settle, it became clear that the impact of the exposé would be long-lasting. The legal community was undergoing a transformation driven by a newfound commitment to integrity and transparency. Reforms were being implemented, and mechanisms were put in place to ensure that such abuses of power would not happen again. For Charles, there was no redemption. His name, once synonymous with success, was now a byword for disgrace. He faced multiple charges, including fraud, embezzlement, and sexual misconduct. His fall from grace was swift and unforgiving, a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked power and corruption. In the end, the exposé was more than just a story. It was a catalyst for change. It had brought justice to those who had suffered and had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the legal landscape. For Lucy, it was a vindication of her struggle and a testament to the power of truth. She had not only avenged herself, but had also helped others find their voice. As she looked out over the city, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and freedom, knowing that her fight had made a difference. Charles's arrest marked a turning point that sent shockwaves through the entire legal community. As the sirens wailed and the police escorted him out of his luxurious office in handcuffs, the once mighty and feared figure of Charles Whitaker appeared small and defeated. The evidence was overwhelming: fraud, embezzlement, and sexual misconduct. The facade he had carefully crafted over years crumbled in an instant, revealing the dark and sinister reality beneath. The law firm wasted no time in distancing itself from the scandal. They issued a public statement denouncing Charles's actions and expressing their resolve to uphold the highest ethical standards. The board swiftly convened an emergency meeting and appointed new leadership, individuals known for their integrity and commitment to justice. This decision was not only a strategic move to salvage the firm's reputation, but also a genuine effort to bring about much-needed change. Lucy watched the events unfold with a mix of emotions. She felt a profound sense of vindication, knowing that her relentless pursuit of the truth had finally borne fruit. The memories of her unjust termination, the whispers in the office, and the sleepless nights spent poring over old case files all seemed to coalesce into this moment of triumph. She had not only avenged herself, but had also given a voice to those who had suffered in silence. The media frenzy surrounding Charles's arrest was intense. News outlets covered every detail, from the initial exposé by Sarah Roberts to the subsequent investigations and eventual charges. The public's response was one of outrage and disbelief. How could such a prominent figure hide such malevolence for so long? The legal community, in particular, was forced to confront its own complicity and the culture of silence that had allowed Charles to operate with impunity. Charles's trial became a spectacle, with former employees and victims coming forward to testify. Their stories were harrowing, painting a picture of a man who had used his power to manipulate, intimidate, and exploit. Each testimony added another layer to the already damning case against him. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence of fraudulent activities, financial discrepancies, and a pattern of sexual misconduct. Charles's legal team, despite their best efforts, could not counter the mountain of evidence. As the trial progressed, Lucy found herself reflecting on her journey. She remembered the early days at the firm, her admiration for Charles, and the crushing disappointment when she realized the truth. She thought about Amanda and the other victims who had been forced into silence. Their bravery in coming forward had been instrumental in bringing Charles to justice. Lucy felt a deep sense of gratitude towards them and towards Sarah, whose investigative prowess had brought the truth to light. The verdict, when it finally came, was unequivocal. Charles was found guilty on all counts. The judge's stern words underscored the gravity of his crimes and the betrayal of trust he had perpetrated. The sentence was severe, reflecting the magnitude of his offenses and serving as a deterrent to others who might abuse their power. As Charles was led away, there was a palpable sense of justice having been served. In the aftermath of the trial, the law firm underwent significant changes. The new leadership implemented rigorous policies to prevent such misconduct in the future. They established a dedicated office for ethics and compliance, ensuring that any allegations of wrongdoing would be promptly and thoroughly investigated. Training programs were introduced to educate employees about their rights and the avenues available for reporting misconduct. Lucy received an outpouring of support from colleagues and strangers alike. Her bravery had inspired many, and her story was seen as a beacon of hope and resilience. She was invited to speak at various forums, sharing her experiences and advocating for a more transparent and just workplace. Each time she spoke, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her efforts were making a difference. She also reconnected with Amanda and the other victims, forming a support network that provided strength and solidarity. They shared their stories, supported each other through the healing process, and worked together to advocate for broader reforms within the industry. Their collective voice became a powerful force, driving changes that would protect future generations from similar abuses. As Lucy looked out over the city one evening, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and freedom. The fight had been long and arduous, but it had been worth it. She had stood up against a powerful adversary and emerged victorious. More importantly, she had helped to bring about a change that would benefit many others. The city lights twinkled below, a testament to the countless stories unfolding in its midst. Lucy knew that her story was just one among many. But it was a story that had made a difference. And for that, she felt truly grateful. Lucy stood at the balcony of her modest apartment, the early morning light casting a golden hue over the cityscape. It had been a whirlwind of events since the publication of the exposé. The once daunting skyline of New York City now seemed less oppressive, more inviting, as if acknowledging her triumph. Her phone buzzed with messages of support and admiration from colleagues and strangers alike. People she had never met reached out, sharing their own stories of resilience and struggle. Each message reaffirmed that her fight had not been in vain. The legal community was in the throes of transformation. Charles's downfall had sparked a wave of introspection within the industry. Firms were reevaluating their policies, implementing stricter regulations to prevent abuse of power. The Bar Association had launched a task force dedicated to addressing misconduct and promoting ethical practices. Lucy's bravery had become a catalyst for change, inspiring others to step forward and demand better for themselves and their peers. As Lucy reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The path had been fraught with challenges, from the initial shock of her unjust termination to the painstaking process of uncovering the truth. Each step had tested her resolve, pushing her to confront fears and doubts. Yet, through it all, she had remained steadfast, driven by a deep-seated belief in justice and integrity. Her thoughts drifted to Amanda, the woman whose own painful experiences had provided a crucial piece of the puzzle. Amanda had since found a renewed sense of purpose, becoming an advocate for those who had suffered in silence. They had stayed in touch, their bond strengthened by the shared understanding of what they had endured. Together, they had turned their individual struggles into a collective force for good. Lucy knew that her journey was far from over. The fight for justice was ongoing, and there were still many battles to be won. But as she looked out over the city, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. The weight of fear and uncertainty had been lifted, replaced by a newfound confidence and clarity of purpose. The law firm where Lucy had once felt so optimistic about her future was now under new leadership. The culture of fear and intimidation that Charles had fostered was being dismantled, replaced by a commitment to transparency and respect. Former colleagues who had once remained silent were now speaking out, their voices adding to the chorus of change. Lucy had received several job offers from other firms, impressed by her tenacity and integrity. While the prospects were tempting, she felt a calling to channel her energy into something more impactful. She had begun collaborating with advocacy groups, using her legal expertise to support initiatives aimed at protecting vulnerable individuals and promoting systemic reform. Her work was gaining recognition, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing she was making a tangible difference in the lives of others. As the sun continued to rise, bathing the city in a warm, golden light, Lucy took a deep breath, savoring the moment. She had faced her fears, stood up for what was right, and emerged stronger for it. Her story was a testament to the power of resilience and the profound impact one person could have in the face of injustice. The journey had been arduous, but every step had been worth it. Lucy had not only reclaimed her own sense of dignity and purpose, but had also paved the way for others to do the same. Her fight had indeed made a difference, and she was ready to embrace the new dawn with open arms, knowing that the best was yet to come.